Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Wednesday, January 30th. This is being taped at 4:01 p.m. Eastern Time. Hope you're surviving this big storm if you live west of me here in New Jersey. Looks like we're going to get whacked in about an hour. Dow Jones finished down 44 points, 13,909. I apologize, yesterday I said the Dow at the time was 100 points short of its all-time high. I meant 200. S&P 500 was down, NASDAQ down to 3141. All three major averages down about 0.3 to 0.4%. Tokyo's Nikkei index was up again 2.3%. It's at its highest level since April of 2010. London and Frankfurt were down. Gold closed up about $15 to $16.75. Oil is back up to $98. Not for nothing, but you've probably noticed your price at the pump going up a little. 10-year Treasury 2%. Today, Wednesday mornings, is the release of the latest Investors Intelligence Bull-Bear readings, and the bull figure rose to 54.3 and the bear figure stayed unchanged at 22.3. So that's still in the danger level of over 30 spread between the two, and it's 32 points. Spain's GDP for the fourth quarter was down worse than expected, 0.7% quarter over quarter, 1.8% on an annualized basis. And then we had our own GDP report this morning for the fourth quarter. Rather surprisingly, down 0.1% when the expectation was for an increase of 1 to 1.5%. However, even though I'm the doom and gloomster, this was a very deceiving report. Consumption was up a solid 2.2% for the quarter. Business investment was up 8.4%. That's good. And housing investment was up 15%. The reason why the GDP ended up down, though, fractionally, is because business inventories fell, highly volatile defense spending plummeted, and government spending fell. More accurate way to look at things is to average the third quarter, which was up 3.1, with the fourth quarter down 0.1, and you have an average of 1.5, and that's the kind of economy we've been in, a 1.5 to 2% growth environment, which is not great. And so, today the Fed's Open Market Committee met and kept its target funds rate at 0, reiterating it will keep it at that level until the unemployment rate is 6.5% and inflation remains in check. In part, the Fed's statement read, "Information received since the Federal Open Market Committee met in December suggests that growth in economic activity paused in recent months, in large part because of weather-related disruptions and other transitory factors. Employment has continued to expand at a moderate pace, but the unemployment rate remains elevated. Household spending and business fixed investment advanced, and the housing sector has shown further improvement. Inflation has been running somewhat below the committee's longer-run objective. Longer-term inflation expectations have remained stable. Although strains in global financial markets have eased somewhat, the committee continues to see downside risk to the economic outlook. The committee also anticipates that inflation over the medium term likely will run at or below its 2% objective. to support a stronger economic recovery and to help ensure that inflation over time is at the rate most consistent with its dual mandate, the committee will continue purchasing additional agency mortgage-backed securities at a pace of $40 billion per month and longer-term Treasury securities at a pace of $45 billion per month. Yippee! So, we have the March 1st sequester, 4 weeks away, so this will be back on the front burner after this little break we have had since Republicans acquiesced over the debt ceiling. But both Republican and Democratic leaders say they don't see any compromise over replacing or delaying the automatic spending cuts. There is a growing feeling, though, especially among Republicans, that not only would the cuts, $1.2 trillion over 10 years, improve the government's books, they won't kill the overall economy. They'll have some impact in the Washington area, that's for sure. If Congress wants to avoid the cuts, which impact most every program except Medicaid, Medicare, and food stamps, they have to find $1.2 trillion in savings elsewhere. Democrats continue to insist that any plan to replace the sequester should be a balance of spending cuts and revenue. Republicans say they've already done enough on the revenue side. $600 billion in new taxes on the wealthy. House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan is pushing for the sequester and then letting the government stay open come the March 27 deadline on a continuing resolution that would fund the government through September 30th. Regarding the sequester, I hope you can't hear the noise in the background. By the way, I've been real lucky with the noise. This is a general, regular neighborhood behind me. When the weather gets better, it's going to be noisy. And the birds will be chirping. Anyway, regarding the sequester and automatic cuts to defense spending, South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said, "I think it's more likely to happen, and I'm ashamed of the Congress, I'm ashamed of the President, and I'm ashamed of being in this body, quite frankly." Graham has been working for months to develop a bipartisan plan to protect the Pentagon. How do you go to somebody in the military who's been deployed 4 or 5 times and say, "For your good work over the last decade, we're going to ruin the military. We're going to make it harder for you to have the equipment you need to fight, and we're going to reduce benefits to your family"? Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Carl Levin isn't real optimistic himself, saying there is a real threat that the sequester will strike in March. Chief of Staff General Ray Odierno predicted that the Army will very quickly go to extremely low levels of readiness in the next 6 months if Congress doesn't get the nation's fiscal house in order by the March 1st deadline to forestall sequestration and the $45 billion in automatic cuts in fiscal 2013. If we do not have a legislative solution that provides our leaders with the time and the flexibility to shape our force for the future, we will create a hollow force. Israeli forces attacked a convoy of trucks on the Syrian-Lebanese border today, striking inside Syria and hitting what sources said was a shipment of Russian-made SA-17 missiles, anti-aircraft missiles and equipment just 3 miles from the Lebanese border. Syrian state TV also said Israeli warplanes struck a military research center northwest of Damascus, but Syria is in no shape to retaliate. So I went to the barber today, hope you can tell, hope you like it. My barber and I have known each other for 20 years. First thing he says to me when I get in the chair was, "What was the deal with that massacre in Syria?" The one I described to you yesterday where over 65 were shot in the back of the head. UN Arab League mediator Lakhdar Brahimi, a good man who has the most thankless job in the world these days, told the UN Security Council last night that Syria is breaking up before everyone's eyes, describing, quote, unprecedented levels of horror from both sides. But the Security Council remains deadlocked on action, namely because of Russia and also China. But Russia has said that insisting on Assad's departure as a condition for peace negotiations between the government and the opposition forces would prevent such talks from ever taking place. The opposition, backed by the United States and much of Europe, has made plain that Assad can play no role in a future Syrian government. So Brahimi said, "I told the Council that I'm embarrassed to be repeating the same thing. Syria is being destroyed bit by bit." Brahimi then added, Syrian factions are getting cross-border support from neighboring countries. Syria is becoming a playground for competing forces. None of the neighbors is immune to the fallout consequences of the conflict. From an editorial in the Times of London, Syrian children are suffering, starving, and dying amid disease and destruction. In the court of the Assads, life is unaffected. For Syrians, it has become an accumulation of horrors visited on a suffering nation by a man of simultaneous callousness and irredeemable mediocrity. International diplomacy, stymied by Russian and Chinese obduracy at the UN Security Council, has failed Syria's people. But the Friends of Syria group of countries can act on their own behalf, however belatedly. The Assad regime has withstood sanctions. It must now face countervailing military force with heavy weaponry deployed to rebel forces on the border with Turkey. Safe zones for Syria's refugees are a mere palliative while Mr. Assad remains in power, but they must know that there is a refuge where they will be defended. Sound familiar? As things stand, a psychopathic criminal regime is literally getting away with mass murder. The UN's atomic watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, made clear on Tuesday it had seen no sign of any explosion at one of Iran's most sensitive nuclear plants, the Fordo facility, uranium enrichment site. Remember, Monday I mentioned there had been media reports of a strike on Fordo with significant damage, but I also cautioned that there are some crackpot foreign affairs strategic websites out there. And the IAEA has inspectors who regularly visit Iran's sites, including the one at Fordo, and the UN suggested that they had been at the site after these reports, and they don't see any evidence of an explosion there. So, that's interesting. In Mali, French forces entered the last major town in the north. The Islamists melted away. Kidal does present issues with two competing clans claiming control as well, but no French casualties reported since day one, when a French pilot was killed and 2 French soldiers died in the Somali rescue attempt of a French hostage, who was then killed by his captors. It was a bleak 48 hours. Since then, the French have rallied. President Francois Hollande has received very favorable press back home, and for good reason, and his approval rating, which had been in free fall over economic issues, has rebounded some, up to 44%. I mean, think how after the first day in Mali, there were those saying this would be France's Afghanistan. No doubt there remain dangers. The Malian and African troops will take over territory the French gain. The French will move to the background, but they'll be vulnerable to terrorist attacks. And domestically, attention will return to Hollande's ineffective policies. But on a related front, French Interior Minister Manuel Valls said Paris is set to deport a string of radical religious imams as part of a fight against global jihadism. Several radical foreign preachers will be expelled in the coming days, Valls told a Brussels conference. I don't confuse this radical Islam with the Islam of France, but there is a religious environment. There are Salafist groupings who are involved in a political process whose aim is to monopolize cultural associations, the schooling system. He added, we will expel all these imams, all these foreign preachers who denigrate women, who hold views that run counter to our values, and who say there is a need to combat France. We have to be extremely firm, and that I will be. So kudos to French Interior Minister Manuel Valls. How about Alex Rodriguez and the latest steroid story? Is he one of the true idiots on the planet? Now, he has his money, one way or another, but there won't be a single fan, single baseball fan in all of America that will respect him or his career. And talk about kissing away any prospects for the Hall of Fame once and for all. That's all for today. I'll be back with you tomorrow, Thursday. Keep the men and women of our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And for more stuff, go to Stocks and News. I'll leave you with Robert Palmer. I miss the guy. And I just looked up. He died, talk about time flying, he died over 9 years ago, September 26, 2003. Very young, just 54. Take care.
Sure.